Nothing like watching your wife fondle her old flame during your son's wedding vows to make you believe in true love. There I was, Harold Keaton, 55 years of pushing numbers around spreadsheets, standing in the back of the Whitmore Mansion's grand ballroom, watching my wife Dana press herself against Victor Lane like they were teenagers at prom instead of middle-aged has-beens at our boy's wedding. The irony wasn't lost on me. 27 years of marriage, and she picks today to resurrect her high school romance. Real classy, Dana. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. You seeing this? Gary whispered beside me, nursing his third beer. My best friend since high school, Gary Brennan had the subtlety of a freight train and the loyalty of a golden retriever. Your missus is practically climbing that sleazeball like a tree. I adjusted my tie and kept my voice level. I see it, Gary. Hard to miss when she's giggling like a schoolgirl every time he whispers in her ear. Victor Lane. Real estate agent, part-time con artist, full-time disappointment. He'd rolled back into our little Maine coastal town 3 months ago, driving a leased BMW and wearing suits that screamed, "Trying too hard." Dana had mentioned running into him at the grocery store, said they'd caught up over coffee. Just old friends, she'd said, nothing to worry about. Right. And I'm the Easter Bunny. The wedding ceremony had been beautiful, I'll give it that. Our son Michael looked happier than I'd seen him in years, and his bride Jennifer was radiant. The old Whitmore mansion, with its weathered shingles and ocean views, made for a perfect backdrop. Storm clouds were gathering offshore, but that just added drama to the photographs. What I hadn't expected was the drama unfolding right in front of me. "Harold, you need to do something about this," Mrs. Pruitt hissed from behind me. Our neighbor had appointed herself the town's unofficial moral authority somewhere around 1987 and never looked back. The whole town's watching? It's embarrassing? She wasn't wrong. I could see the whispers spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Dana's behavior wasn't exactly subtle. She'd positioned herself at Victor's table during dinner, abandoning me to sit with the accountants from my firm. Every few minutes, she'd throw her head back and laugh at something he said, her hand lingering on his arm just a beat too long. "During the father-son toast," Gary muttered. "She actually licked her lips when he was talking. I thought Jenkins was going to choke on his champagne." I'd given my toast earlier. Something heartfelt about Michael growing into a fine man and finding love with Jennifer. Standard father-of-the-groom material. The whole time, Dana had been making eyes at Victor across the room. When I sat down, she didn't even acknowledge me, just kept giggling at whatever Victor was whispering. The band struck up a slow song, and couples began moving toward the dance floor. I turned to ask Dana for a dance, but she was gone. So was Victor. "They went toward the gardens," Mrs. Pruitt informed me, her voice dripping with disapproval. "About 5 minutes ago. Together." Gary clapped me on the shoulder. "Come on, Harold. Let's get some air. Maybe check out those gardens ourselves." We stepped onto the mansion's wraparound porch. The storm was moving in faster now, and the wind carried the salt smell of the ocean. I could hear voices from the garden below, Dana's laugh floating up through the evening air. She sounded drunk, or maybe just drunk on nostalgia. "Harold, you're a better man than me," Gary said, lighting a cigarette. "I'd have already made a scene." "Making a scene at my son's wedding isn't exactly my style, Gary. Besides, I'm still processing this." That was a lie. I wasn't processing anything. I was calculating. 27 years of marriage and she throws it away for Victor Lane? The same Victor Lane who'd knocked up Susie Morrison's senior year and skipped town rather than face her father? The same Victor who'd sold Mrs. Henderson that swampland in Florida, claiming it was a future golf course community? My phone buzzed. Text message. I glanced at the screen and felt my world tilt sideways. "Finally free from him? Meet me at the usual place tomorrow. Can't wait to pick up where we left off. V. Wrong number. Victor had meant to send that to Dana, not me. But there it was, in black and white, confirming what I'd been trying not to believe. Gary, I said quietly, I think I'm done being the nice guy. He looked at the phone screen and whistled low. Well, shit, Harold. That's about as clear as it gets. The garden voices were getting louder. Dana's laugh had turned into something else, something breathier. I pocketed the phone and straightened my shoulders. You know what, Gary? Let them have their moment. Tomorrow's going to be very interesting. That was the moment, right there in the storm-scented evening air, that Harold Keaton the pushover passed away. What rose from his ashes was something Dana and Victor weren't prepared for. Something with access to bank accounts, property deeds, and 30 years of small-town connections. Something that knew exactly where all the bodies were buried. The house felt different when we got home that night. Same furniture, same family photos lining the hallway, same creaky floorboard by the stairs. But something fundamental had shifted, like the moment when you realize the foundation has been slowly settling for years and suddenly notice all the cracks in the walls. Dana stumbled in behind me, humming some song from our high school days. She'd had too much champagne, or maybe just too much Victor. Her lipstick was smeared, and there was a grass stain on her dress that definitely hadn't been there during the ceremony. Beautiful wedding, wasn't it? She said, kicking off her heels. Michael looked so handsome, and Jennifer's dress was gorgeous. I hung my jacket in the closet and loosened my tie. It was nice seeing everyone, even some faces I hadn't expected. She paused in the hallway, suddenly alert despite the alcohol. What do you mean? Victor Lane. Interesting that he got an invitation. I don't remember him being on our list. Oh, that. She waved a hand dismissively. I ran into him at Murphy's Market a few weeks ago. He mentioned how much Michael meant to him back when he used to help coach Little League. I thought it would be nice to include him. Another lie. Victor Lane had never coached Little League in his life. He'd been too busy running small-time scams and chasing anything in a skirt. But I just nodded and smiled. That was thoughtful of you. You two seem to catch up quite a bit. We're old friends, Harold. We have history. History. That was one word for it. I went to my home office and closed the door. 27 years of marriage had taught me a few things about Dana, and one of them was that she was terrible at covering her tracks. She kept everything: old letters, receipts, photographs, diary entries. She called it being sentimental. I called it evidence. My computer hummed to life, and I started with the basics: bank statements, credit card records, phone bills. Dana had always handled the household accounts, but everything was in both our names: joint checking, joint savings, joint credit cards. She'd insisted on it early in our marriage, said it showed trust. Funny how trust works both ways. The phone records were illuminating. Calls to Victor's number going back 6 weeks, some lasting over an hour. Text messages, too, though I couldn't see the content without her phone. But the pattern was clear. Daily contact, increasing in frequency. I pulled up our property records next. The house was in both names, but Dana's flower shop, Petal and Stem, was more interesting. The lease was in my name, signed 3 years ago when she'd needed a co-signer. The business loan, too. Even the insurance policy. On paper, I owned her entire livelihood. The irony was delicious. Dana had always been the social butterfly, the one with connections and charm. I was just the boring accountant husband, useful for tax returns and mortgage applications. She'd probably forgotten I was even on the business paperwork. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Victor, this one clearly meant for Dana. Can't stop thinking about tonight. You felt so good in my arms. Tomorrow can't come soon enough. I screenshot both messages and saved them to a secure folder. Then I did something I'd never done in 27 years of marriage. I went through Dana's purse. She'd left it on the kitchen counter, next to her discarded shoes. Her phone was inside, battery nearly over but still functional. No passcode, because Dana trusted everyone and assumed everyone trusted her. The text conversation with Victor was a masterpiece of middle-aged infidelity. 6 weeks of increasingly intimate messages, starting with innocent reminiscing and escalating to explicit planning. Tonight had been their first physical encounter, but they'd been building to it for weeks. "Harold's so boring," read one message from 3 days ago. "He comes home, does his spreadsheets, watches the news and goes to bed. I feel like I'm dying of boredom." "You deserve better," Victor had replied. "You deserve passion, fire. Remember how we used to be?" "I remember everything," she'd written back. "I should have chosen you instead of stability. Money isn't everything." I photographed the entire conversation with my own phone, then put her phone back exactly where I'd found it. 27 years of marriage, and she thought I was boring. Well, Dana was about to discover just how interesting boring could be. The front door opened, and Gary's voice called out softly, "Harold? You decent?" I found him in the kitchen, holding a manila envelope and grinning like a cat with a canary. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "Kept thinking about that text message. So I took a little drive past the seaside motel. You know, the place Victor's been staying since he got back to town." He handed me the envelope. Inside were photographs, clearly taken from a car window. Dana and Victor in the motel parking lot, kissing against his BMW. Dana and Victor entering room 237 together. Timestamps showed they'd been there for over an hour. "Gary, you magnificent bastard. 23 years as a plumber teaches you a few things about catching cheaters," he said. "Half my service calls were suspicious spouses wanting me to install hidden cameras. I never did it, but I learned where people go when they don't want to be seen." I spread the photos on the kitchen table. Combined with the text messages and phone records, I had enough evidence to bury Dana in any divorce proceeding. But divorce was messy, expensive, and public. It would hurt Michael and Jennifer, drag our families through the mud, and probably leave me paying alimony to fund Dana's new life with Victor. There had to be a better way, a more creative solution. "Gary, what do you know about Victor's living situation?" "He's renting the old Morrison place on Elm Street. Month-to-month lease from what I hear." "Why?" "Just curious. What about his business? How's the real estate market treating him?" "Like a red-headed stepchild. He's sold maybe 3 houses since he got back, all of them fixer-uppers to out-of-state buyers who didn't know better. Word is he's behind on his office rent." I nodded thoughtfully. Victor Lane, man of mystery and passion, was actually a small-time loser living paycheck to paycheck. Dana was throwing away our marriage for a man who couldn't afford to take her to a decent restaurant. "Harold," Gary said carefully, "what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that boring accountants know things, Gary. We know about money and property and legal documents. We know about consequences." I gathered up the photographs and tucked them back into the envelope. "I'm thinking that Dana wants excitement and passion. Maybe it's time to give her exactly what she's asking for." The storm had arrived while we were talking, and rain was beginning to patter against the kitchen windows. Somewhere upstairs, Dana was probably dreaming about her romantic reunion with Victor, planning their future together. She had no idea that her boring husband was planning too. And accountants, as Dana was about to learn, are very, very good at planning. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, perfect weather for what I had planned. Dana left early for the flower shop, humming and practically glowing with post-affair satisfaction. She kissed my cheek at the door, the same perfunctory peck she'd given me every morning for the past 5 years. "Have a good day, honey," she said. "I'll be working late tonight." Inventory. Inventory, right. More like an inventory of Victor's anatomy. I waited until her car disappeared around the corner, then made my first call. "Brennan Locksmith, Gary speaking." "Since when are you a locksmith?" "Since I got my license last year." Figured it was a natural extension of the plumbing business. You'd be amazed how many people lock themselves out while I'm fixing their pipes. What do you need? I need the locks changed at pedal and stem, this morning, and I need it done quietly. Harold, you sure about this? I'm sure. Meet me there in 20 minutes. Pedal and Stem occupied a narrow storefront on Main Street, squeezed between Murphy's Market and the post office. Dana had poured her heart into the place, and I had to admit it was beautiful. Bright, cheerful, full of life and color. It was also mortgaged to the hilt and barely breaking even. Gary's van was already parked outside when I arrived. He was examining the front door lock with professional interest. Standard deadbolt, he said. Easy job. But Harold, this is still her business. Check the paperwork, Gary. The lease is in my name. The business loan is in my name. The insurance policy is in my name. Legally speaking, this is my business. Dana just works here. And you're firing her? I'm restructuring. Come on, let's get this done before Maggie arrives. Maggie Connors was Dana's assistant, a sweet girl in her 20s who believed in true love and happy endings. She was also completely dependent on Dana for her paycheck, which made her loyalty predictable. Gary worked quickly, installing new locks on both the front and back doors. While he worked, I went through the shop's files, gathering financial records and supplier contracts. Everything was worse than I'd thought. Dana had been juggling payments for months, robbing Peter to pay Paul, keeping the business afloat through sheer stubborn will and creative accounting. Creative accounting. That was my department. All done, Gary announced. New keys and the old ones won't work anymore. You want to tell me what comes next? Next, we wait for Maggie to arrive and discover she can't get in. Then we wait for her to call Dana. Then we wait for Dana to rush over here in a panic. And then Dana discovers that her boring husband isn't quite as boring as she thought. Maggie arrived at 9:30, right on schedule. I watched from Murphy's Market as she tried her key in the front door, then tried it again, then pulled out her phone. Through the window, I could see her animated conversation with Dana. 5 minutes later, Dana's car screeched into the parking space outside the shop. She tried her own key, then started pounding on the door. When that didn't work, she came into Murphy's Market, where I was innocently buying coffee and a newspaper. Harold, thank God you're here. Something's wrong with the shop. The locks aren't working. That's strange. Have you called a locksmith? I called Gary, but he's not answering his phone. Gary was probably screening his calls. Smart man. Well, I said reasonably, I suppose we should figure out what happened. Do you have the lease handy? Maybe the landlord changed the locks for some reason. Dana's face went pale. The lease? You know, the rental agreement. The contract that gives you the right to use the space. Harold, you signed the lease. It's in your name. That's right, I did. Which means I'm the tenant, not you. Interesting situation, isn't it? She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning. Dana wasn't stupid, just self-absorbed. She was beginning to realize that her boring husband held all the cards. Harold, what's going on? What's going on, Dana, is that I've decided to make some changes to the business. Restructuring, you might say. Cost-cutting measures. What kind of cost-cutting measures? Well, for starters, I'm eliminating some redundant personnel. Maggie, for instance. Sweet girl, but we really don't need an assistant for a business that's barely profitable. Maggie, who had been listening from the doorway, made a small sound of distress. And I'm also eliminating the manager position, I continued. Seems like an unnecessary expense for such a small operation. Harold, you can't fire me from my own business. It's not your business, Dana. It's mine. Check the paperwork. The lease, the loan, the insurance, it's all in my name. You're just an employee, and frankly, not a very good one. The color drained from her face completely. Around us, Murphy's Market had gone quiet. Mrs. Henderson was pretending to examine soup cans, but I could tell she was listening to every word. By noon, the whole town would know about this conversation. "This is about Victor, isn't it?" Dana whispered. "Victor? Why would this be about Victor? This is about business, Dana, pure and simple. The shop is losing money, and I can't afford to subsidize your hobby anymore." "My hobby? Harold, I've put everything into this place." "Yes, you have. Unfortunately, you put it into a business that belongs to me." I pulled a folded paper from my jacket pocket. "This is a formal notice of termination, effective immediately. You'll find your final paycheck attached, along with information about Cobra health insurance coverage." Dana took the paper with shaking hands. "Harold, please, we can work this out. We can talk about this." "Actually, we can't. You see, I've decided to close the shop permanently. I'm converting the space to something more profitable. Maybe a tax preparation office. There's always demand for that." "You bastard." "Now, Dana, there's no need for name-calling. This is just business." She turned and walked out, leaving Maggie standing in the doorway with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Maggie," I said gently. "I know this isn't what you wanted to hear, but the business just isn't sustainable." "What about the flowers? We have orders for this week." "I'll handle the orders. Don't worry about that." She nodded and left, probably to find Dana and offer comfort. Good. Dana would need all the comfort she could get. I spent the rest of the morning in the shop, going through Dana's files and making phone calls. The suppliers were understanding when I explained that Petal and Stem was closing. The outstanding orders were small enough that I could fulfill them myself or refer customers to other florists in neighboring towns. By lunchtime, the word had spread. My phone was ringing constantly. Friends, neighbors, business associates, all wanting to know what was happening. I gave everyone the same story. Economic pressures, difficult decisions, purely financial considerations. Nobody mentioned Victor Lane, but I could hear the unasked questions in their voices. Gary stopped by around 2 o'clock, grinning like a fool. "Jesus, Harold! The whole town's talking about this. Mrs. Pruitt cornered me at the hardware store, wanted to know if Dana was having an affair." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that wasn't my business, but I also mentioned that I'd seen Victor's BMW at the Seaside Motel an awful lot lately." "Gary, you're a treasure." "So what's next? You've got Dana's attention, that's for sure." "Next, we pay a visit to Victor. I think it's time he and I had a conversation." The Morrison place on Elm Street was a tired-looking colonial that had seen better days. Victor's BMW was parked in the driveway, looking conspicuously expensive next to the peeling paint and sagging porch. I knocked on the front door and waited. Victor answered, wearing a bathrobe and looking like he'd just woken up. When he saw me, his expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "Harold, what are you doing here?" "Hello, Victor. We need to talk." "About what?" "About Dana, about your future plans, about some text messages you sent to the wrong number." His face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do." "Finally free from him? Can't wait to pick up where we left off?" Ring any bells? Victor stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind him. "Look, Harold, I can explain." "I'm sure you can. But first, let me explain something to you. This is a small town, Victor. People talk, people notice things, and people remember when someone skips town owing money. I don't owe anybody money. Not yet. But you're behind on your rent here, aren't you? And your office rent downtown. And I heard you had some trouble with that Florida land deal a few years back." Victor's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand your situation. You're a small-time operator in a small town, living paycheck to paycheck, chasing after another man's wife. That's not a sustainable business model, Victor." "Dana's not happy with you, Harold. She told me so herself." "Dana tells people lots of things, but here's what she probably didn't tell you. She doesn't actually own anything. Her business, her house, her car, even her credit cards. It's all in my name, Victor. All of it." I could see him processing this information, calculating the implications. So, if you're thinking about running away together, I continued, you should know that she'll be bringing exactly nothing to the relationship. No business, no assets, no income, just debt and a reputation for adultery. You can't do this to her. I'm not doing anything to her, Victor. I'm just making some business decisions. Pure economics. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Victor, you might want to start looking for a new place to live. I hear the Morrison family is thinking about selling this house. Something about wanting a more reliable tenant. His face went from white to gray. You don't own this place. No, but I do their taxes. Have for 15 years. We're very close. I walked back to my car, leaving Victor standing on the porch in his bathrobe, probably wondering how his romantic conquest had turned into a financial disaster. My phone rang as I was driving home. Dana. Harold, we need to talk. I'm listening. Not on the phone. Meet me at home. Please. I'll be there in 10 minutes. This was going to be interesting. Dana was waiting in our living room when I got home, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. She'd changed out of her work clothes into jeans and a sweater, and her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She looked younger somehow, more like the girl I'd married 27 years ago. Harold, sit down, please. I took my usual chair, the worn leather recliner I'd bought when Michael was born. Dana perched on the edge of the sofa, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I know you're angry, she began, and you have every right to be. But closing my shop, firing Maggie, threatening Victor, this isn't like you. Maybe you don't know me as well as you think you do. I've been married to you for 27 years, Harold. I know you. You're kind and patient and forgiving. You don't destroy people's lives out of spite. Spite? Is that what you think this is? Isn't it? I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshot of Victor's first text message. Finally free from him? Meet me at the usual place tomorrow. Can't wait to pick up where we left off. Her face crumpled. Harold, I can explain. Can you? Because I'd love to hear an explanation for 6 weeks of text messages, phone calls, and motel room visits. I'd love to hear you explain how your boring husband deserved to be humiliated at his own son's wedding. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. It just happened. Nothing just happens, Dana. You made choices. You chose to reconnect with Victor. You chose to meet him for coffee. You chose to start texting him. You chose to sleep with him. Every step of the way, you chose him over me. Tears were streaming down her face now. I felt so trapped, Harold. So invisible. We've been going through the motions for years, and I felt like I was disappearing. So you decided to have an affair. I decided to feel alive again. Victor makes me feel young and beautiful and desired. When was the last time you looked at me that way? When was the last time you gave me a reason to? When was the last time you showed any interest in me beyond my ability to pay bills and fix problems? She had no answer for that. But you're right about one thing, I continued. The old Harold would have been kind and patient and forgiving. The old Harold would have suggested marriage counseling and worked hard to save our relationship. The old Harold would have blamed himself for your affair. But the old Harold passed away Saturday night, Dana. He faded when you chose to humiliate him in front of his friends and family. What you're dealing with now is someone completely different. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Mrs. Pruitt was working in her garden, probably hoping to catch a glimpse of our drama unfolding. So, what happens now? Dana asked quietly. Now you live with the consequences of your choices. You wanted excitement and passion? Congratulations. You're about to get more excitement than you can handle. What do you mean? I mean that your lover is about to discover that romance doesn't pay the bills. Victor's behind on his rent, Dana. His real estate business is failing. He's been counting on you to help support him. That's not true, isn't it? Ask him about his financial situation. Ask him about his plans for the future. Ask him how he intends to support you when you don't have a business or a house or any assets at all." Dana's face went pale again. "Harold, you can't take everything. There are laws about marital property. You're right. In a divorce, you'd be entitled to half of our marital assets, but we're not getting divorced, Dana." "We're not?" "No. You see, divorce would be messy and expensive and public. It would hurt Michael and Jennifer. It would drag our families through the courts, and frankly, it would be too easy on you." "I don't understand." "You will. Give it time." My phone rang. "Gary. Harold, you need to get down to the lobster trap. Victor's here, and he's drunk and talking loud about you and Dana." "On my way." I grabbed my jacket. Dana jumped up from the sofa. "Where are you going?" "To have a conversation with your boyfriend. Don't wait up." The Lobster Trap was Millfield's only real bar, a dark, smoky place that catered to lobstermen, construction workers, and anyone else who needed somewhere to drink away their troubles. I'd been there maybe a dozen times in my life, usually for retirement parties or bachelor celebrations. Victor was holding court at the far end of the bar, gesturing wildly with a beer bottle and speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Boring little accountant thinks he can intimidate me," he was saying. "Harold Keaton couldn't intimidate a church mouse. Dana's finally ready to leave him, and there's nothing he can do about it." Gary was sitting at the other end of the bar, nursing a beer and watching the show. He nodded toward Victor when I walked in. "He's been at it for about an hour," Gary said quietly, getting louder and drunker by the minute. I ordered a beer and listened to Victor's performance. He was telling anyone who would listen about his passionate reunion with Dana, how they'd been meant for each other, how Harold Keaton was a pathetic loser who didn't deserve a woman like her. "She told me she's been miserable for years," Victor announced, "living with a man who treats her like a roommate instead of a lover. She deserves better than that." I finished my beer and walked over to Victor's end of the bar. The conversation faded as I approached. "Victor, enjoying your evening?" He turned to face me, swaying slightly. "Harold, come to beg me to give your wife back?" "Actually, I came to give you something." I pulled the manila envelope from my jacket and emptied its contents onto the bar. The photographs Gary had taken scattered across the wooden surface, Victor and Dana kissing in the motel parking lot, entering room 237 together, Victor's hand on Dana's ass as they walked toward the door. The bar went completely silent. "Thought you might like some souvenirs," I said conversationally. "Gary's quite the photographer." Victor's face turned crimson. He reached for the photos, but I was faster, gathering them up and returning them to the envelope. "Those are private." "Nothing's private in a small town, Victor. You should have learned that the first time you lived here. You bastard. You had us followed. I had nothing to do with these photos. Gary took them on his own initiative. Seems he was concerned about my welfare." Gary raised his beer in a mock toast. "Just looking out for my friend." Victor lunged toward me, but the alcohol made him clumsy. I stepped aside easily, and he stumbled into a bar stool. "Easy there, Romeo. Wouldn't want you to hurt yourself." "I'll eliminate you, you snake." "Now, Victor, that sounds like a threat. In front of witnesses, no less. I should probably report that to Detective Morse." Linda Morse was Millfield's only detective, a tough woman in her 60s who'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by much. She was also my neighbor and occasional poker partner. "This isn't over, Harold. You're right about that. It's just getting started." I left the envelope on the bar and walked toward the door. Behind me, I could hear Victor trying to gather up the scattered photographs, while the other patrons whispered among themselves. "Harold," Gary called out. "Want some company?" "Thanks, but I think I'll walk home alone. It's a nice night for thinking." The walk home took me past Victor's rental house on Elm Street. His BMW wasn't in the driveway, which meant he was probably still at the bar, making a fool of himself. I wondered how long it would take him to realize that his romantic conquest was turning into a public humiliation. Dana was waiting up when I got home, sitting in the dark living room with a glass of wine. "How did it go?" she asked. "About as well as expected. Victor's not handling the pressure very gracefully. Harold, this has to stop. You're destroying people's lives." "I'm not destroying anything, Dana. I'm just revealing what was already there. Victor's a loser who preys on unhappy women. You're a middle-aged woman who threw away her marriage for a fantasy. I'm just making sure everyone sees the situation clearly." "And what about you? What does that make you?" "Me? I'm the boring accountant who finally got tired of being taken for granted." I headed toward the stairs, then paused. "Oh, and Dana, you might want to find somewhere else to stay for a while. I think we both need some space to figure out what comes next." "Harold, this is my home too." "Actually, it's not. Check the deed. The house is in my name, just like everything else." I left her sitting in the dark, probably wondering how her exciting new romance had turned into a complete disaster. Upstairs, I lay in bed listening to the sounds of the house settling around me. Somewhere in town, Victor was probably still drinking and plotting his revenge. Dana was downstairs, crying into her wine glass and regretting her choices. And me? I was planning my next move, because this was far from over. The storm that had been threatening all week finally arrived Thursday night, bringing with it the kind of wind and rain that makes coastal Maine feel like the edge of the world. I was in my office, going over some client files, when I heard Dana's car in the driveway. She'd been staying at her sister's house in Portland since Tuesday, but I'd been expecting this visit. Desperate people do desperate things, and Dana was running out of options. The front door slammed open, and I heard her stumbling in the hallway. She was drunk, not tipsy, but seriously, dangerously drunk. Her footsteps were uneven as she made her way toward my office. "Harold!" she called out. "Harold, we need to talk!" I saved my work and turned to face the door. Dana appeared in the doorway, soaked from the rain, her hair plastered to her head. She was wearing the same clothes she'd had on when she left Tuesday morning, and they looked like she'd been sleeping in them. "Dana, you look terrible. Thanks to you, you bastard. Thanks to you and your little revenge campaign." She stumbled into the room and collapsed into the chair across from my desk. Up close, she looked even worse. Dark circles under her eyes, trembling hands, the sour smell of alcohol and desperation. "Victor's gone," she said. "Did you know that? He left town yesterday, packed up his car and disappeared without even saying goodbye." "I'm sorry to hear that." "No, you're not. You're glad. This is exactly what you wanted." She was right, of course. Victor's departure had been inevitable once the pressure mounted. The Morrison family had asked him to leave their rental house. His real estate office had evicted him for non-payment of rent. And the photos from the lobster trap had made him a laughingstock throughout the town. "What I wanted was a faithful wife," I said. "What I got was a cheating whore who humiliated me at my own son's wedding." Dana flinched, as if I'd slapped her. In 27 years of marriage, I'd never called her anything worse than difficult. "I made a mistake, Harold. I admit that. But what you've done to me is so much worse." "What I've done to you?" "I haven't done anything to you, Dana. I've simply stopped enabling your irresponsible behavior. You destroyed my business. I closed my business. There's a difference. You turned the whole town against me. I didn't have to. You did that yourself when you decided to have a public affair." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small digital recorder. "I want you to admit what you've done. I want you to confess that this whole thing has been about revenge. Put that away, Dana. You're embarrassing yourself. Admit it. Admit that you've been systematically destroying my life because I had an affair." "Fine. Yes, I've been systematically destroying your life. Are you happy now?" She fumbled with the recorder, trying to stop the recording, but her hands were shaking too badly. The device slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. "You snake. You planned this whole thing." "Of course I planned it." "What did you expect, Dana? Did you think I'd just roll over and let you walk all over me forever?" She lunged across the desk, trying to grab me, but I caught her wrists easily. She was drunk and off balance, and I was stone sober and angry. "Let go of me." "Gladly." I released her wrists, and she stumbled backward into the bookshelf. A framed photo of our wedding day fell to the floor, the glass shattering. "Look what you've done," she said, staring at the broken frame. "What I've done? You're the one who destroyed our marriage, Dana. I'm just cleaning up the mess." She bent down to pick up the photo, cutting her finger on the broken glass. Red liquid dripped onto our wedding portrait, staining the image of our younger, happier selves. 27 years, she whispered. 27 years, and this is how it ends. This is how you chose to end it. She looked up at me, and for a moment I saw the girl I'd married. Young, vulnerable, full of dreams and possibilities. Then the moment passed, and she was just a middle-aged woman who'd made terrible choices. "I'm leaving," she said. "I'm leaving Millfield, and I'm never coming back." "Where will you go? You don't have any money, any job, any prospects." "I'll figure something out. I always do." "Not this time. This time you've burned all your bridges." She stood up slowly, cradling her bleeding finger. "You know what the worst part is, Harold? I actually loved you once. I really did. But you turned into such a boring, predictable man that I forgot why. And you turned into a selfish, faithless woman who forgot what marriage means. At least I tried to feel something. At least I tried to be alive. You tried to have your cake and eat it too. You wanted the security of marriage and the excitement of an affair. Well, congratulations. Now you have neither." She walked to the door, then turned back one last time. "I hope you're happy, Harold. I hope this revenge was worth destroying everything we built together." "We didn't build anything together, Dana. I built it, and you took it for granted." She left without another word. I heard her car start up in the driveway, then pull away into the storm. I picked up the broken wedding photo and looked at our younger faces, smiling at the camera with such hope and optimism. That couple had believed in forever. They'd believed in love conquering all, in growing old together, in happily ever after. They'd been fools. I threw the photo in the trash and went back to my work. Outside, the storm was getting worse, but inside my office, everything was calm and quiet and orderly, just the way I liked it. My phone rang around midnight. Detective Linda Morse. "Harold, I'm sorry to bother you so late, but I wanted to give you a heads up. Dana's car went off the road about 20 miles south of town. She's okay, just shaken up and still drunk. State police are holding her for DUI." "I see. She's asking for you to come get her." "I'm afraid that's not possible, Linda. Dana and I are separated. She's not my responsibility anymore." "Harold, she's your wife. She's the woman who was married to me. There's a difference." Linda was quiet for a moment. "This is about the affair, isn't it? This is about choices and consequences, Linda. Dana made her choices. Now she gets to live with the consequences." "And what about you? What do you get to live with?" "Peace and quiet. For the first time in years." After I hung up, I poured myself a glass of scotch and sat in my recliner, listening to the storm. Somewhere in a jail cell, Dana was probably crying and regretting her choices. Somewhere on a highway heading south, Victor was probably congratulating himself on escaping before things got worse. And here I was, alone in my house, surrounded by the debris of a 27-year marriage. I should have felt guilty. I should have felt sorry for Dana, or at least conflicted about what I'd done to her. Instead, I felt nothing but satisfaction. The boring accountant had finally had his day. Friday morning brought clear skies and the kind of crisp autumn air that makes you believe in new beginnings. I was having coffee on the back porch when Gary showed up, looking like he hadn't slept all night. "Jesus, Harold, the whole town's talking about Dana's accident. Linda Morse said you refused to bail her out." "Dana's not my problem anymore, Gary." She's still your wife. Not for long. Gary sat down heavily in the other porch chair. You know, when this whole thing started, I thought you were just trying to scare her. Get her attention, maybe save your marriage. I didn't think you'd actually destroy her. I didn't destroy Dana. She destroyed herself. I just stopped enabling her self-destruction. Harold, she could have faded last night. That curve on Route 1 is dangerous in good weather, let alone in a storm. But she didn't fade. She's alive, she's sober, and she's finally facing reality. What reality is that? That actions have consequences, that you can't treat people like garbage and expect them to keep taking it, that the boring husband she took for granted actually had some fight in him. Gary was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the ocean. So what happens now? You going to divorce her? Eventually, when I'm ready, when it suits my purposes. And until then? Until then, Dana gets to experience life without a safety net. No business, no house, no husband to bail her out when things go wrong. She wanted excitement and independence. Now she has both. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. This is Dana. I'm at the county jail. Please come get me. I'm sorry for everything. We can work this out. I showed the message to Gary. He shook his head. You're really not going to help her? She made her choice, Gary. She chose Victor over me. She chose excitement over stability. She chose to humiliate me in front of the entire town. Now she gets to live with those choices. Harold, this isn't you. The man I've known for 30 years wouldn't leave his wife in jail out of spite. The man you knew for 30 years was a pushover who let people walk all over him. That man is gone. I deleted Dana's text message without responding. Around noon, Mrs. Pruitt knocked on my front door. She was carrying a casserole dish and wearing her most concerned expression. Harold, dear, I heard about Dana's accident. How is she? She's fine, Mrs. Pruitt. Thank you for asking. I brought you some tuna casserole. I thought you might not feel like cooking. That's very thoughtful of you. She lingered on the doorstep, clearly fishing for information. Will Dana be coming home soon? I don't think so. We're separated. Oh, Harold, I'm so sorry. Marriage is such hard work, isn't it? But with counseling and prayer, I'm sure you two can work things out. Some things can't be worked out, Mrs. Pruitt. Some mistakes are too big to forgive. Nothing is too big for forgiveness, Harold. That's what marriage is about, forgiving each other's faults and starting over. Dana didn't make a mistake, Mrs. Pruitt. She made a choice. She chose to have an affair with Victor Lane. She chose to humiliate me at my son's wedding. She chose to throw away 27 years of marriage for a few weeks of excitement. Mrs. Pruitt's eyes widened. She'd suspected, of course, but hearing it confirmed was still shocking. Harold, I had no idea. I saw them together at the wedding, but I never imagined. Now you know. And now the whole town knows. Dana got her excitement and I got my revenge. Revenge isn't Christian, Harold. Neither is adultery. That afternoon, I drove to the county jail to observe Dana's release. I didn't go inside. I just parked across the street and waited. Around 3 o'clock, she emerged, looking haggard and defeated. She'd managed to call her sister in Portland, who picked her up in a battered Honda Civic. As they drove away, Dana looked back at the jail, then at the town beyond it. She was leaving Millfield the same way Victor had, broke, humiliated, and alone. I felt a moment of something that might have been pity. Then I remembered the wedding, the text messages, the motel room photos, and the feeling passed. That evening, I went to the Lobster Trap for a drink. The place was buzzing with conversation about Dana's arrest, her affair, and my calculated revenge. Some people thought I'd been too harsh. Others thought she'd gotten what she deserved. "Harold," called out Tom Jenkins from across the bar. "Heard you gave Dana the old heave-ho. About time, if you ask me. Woman had no respect." "Nobody asked you, Tom," said his wife Mary. "Harold, I'm sorry about everything. Dana made some poor choices, but 27 years of marriage should count for something. It did count for something, Mary. It counted for 27 years of me being taken for granted. Gary joined me at the bar, ordering his usual beer. Dana's sister called me, asked if I thought you might change your mind about helping. What did you tell her? I told her that Harold Keaton doesn't change his mind once it's made up. You know me well. I thought I did. This version of you is someone new. This version of me is someone who finally got tired of being everyone's doormat. Around 10 o'clock, Detective Linda Morse walked in, still in uniform. She ordered a beer and sat down next to me. Evening, Harold. How are you holding up? Fine, Linda. Just fine. Dana's sister says she's planning to move to Florida, start over somewhere new. Good for her. She also says Dana's been asking about you, wondering if you might be willing to talk. Nothing to talk about. Linda studied my face. You know, I've seen a lot of marriages fall apart over the years. Infidelity, money problems, addiction, abuse. But I've never seen someone dismantle their spouse's life so methodically. Dana dismantled her own life. I just stopped putting it back together for her. That's one way to look at it. That's the only way to look at it. Linda finished her beer and stood up. For what it's worth, Harold, I think you're making a mistake. Revenge might feel good in the short term, but it's not sustainable. Eventually, you're going to have to live with what you've done. I'm living with it just fine. Are you? Because from where I sit, you look like a man who's won a battle but lost himself in the process. After she left, I sat at the bar for another hour, thinking about her words. Around me, the conversation continued. People discussing Dana's fall from grace, Victor's cowardly departure, and my transformation from pushover to predator. You did the right thing, Tom Jenkins said, clapping me on the shoulder. Can't let women walk all over you. Got to show them who's boss. Harold always was tougher than he looked, added Pete Morrison. Remember when he pitched in high school? Had a hell of a curveball. Still does, Gary said quietly. I finished my drink and headed home, walking through the quiet streets of Millfield. The town looked the same as it had a week ago, but everything had changed. Dana was gone, Victor was gone, and I was alone in the house we'd shared for over 2 decades. In the kitchen, I found a note that had been slipped under the door. Harold, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. Not just for the affair, but for taking you for granted all these years. You deserved better than I gave you. I'm leaving Maine tomorrow. I won't contact you again. I hope someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me. Dana. I read the note twice, then crumpled it up and threw it in the trash. Outside, the wind was picking up again, carrying the salt smell of the ocean and the promise of another storm. I poured myself a scotch and sat in my recliner, surrounded by the silence of my empty house. Dana had wanted excitement and passion. She'd gotten both, along with poverty, humiliation, and exile. Victor had wanted easy money and a gullible woman. He'd gotten neither, along with a reputation that would follow him wherever he went. And me? I'd wanted respect and revenge. I'd gotten both, along with a house full of memories and a future full of solitude. The boring accountant had finally made his mark. The whole town would remember Harold Keaton now, not as the pushover who let his wife walk all over him, but as the man who systematically destroyed anyone who crossed him. I raised my glass in a toast to the empty room. Here's to consequences, I said aloud. Here's to choices and payback and the sweet satisfaction of watching your enemies destroy themselves. The scotch burned going down, but it tasted like victory. Outside, the storm was building again, but inside my house, everything was calm and quiet and orderly, just the way I liked it. Dana had wanted a bouquet of roses for her new life with Victor. Instead, I'd given her a bouquet of ashes.